Hello again everybody, and today's talk is another one in the series about things in Roman Britain. This time it's about the ancient fortress city and later cathedral city of Chester, known to the Romans as Deva, or Deva as I suppose we should pronounce it. What do we know about Chester? Why was it there? What might its history have been? Well, it was an early legionary fortress. It was started to be built in perhaps the late 60s, certainly in the 70s. There was quite a lot of building work under a governor called Sextus Julius Frontinus, and the legion that was first stationed there was the 2nd Legion Avitus, which had been stationed at Viraconium, Roxita, which is sort of in the direction of Shrewsbury. There were 3 major legionary fortresses at this stage. Each of them had not been the original place for those legions. There was one in South Wales, a place called Caecilius. There was Chester, and there was York, and each of these had been moved. York, the 9th Legion, had been moved up from Lincoln. The 2nd Legion Avitus had gone from Viraconium to Deva to Chester, and the Legion in South Wales had been moved forward from Gloucester. In each case, this is pushing the border forwards as the Romans invaded Britain and started the process of making it more like a Roman province. Why was Chester put where it was? Well, it occupied a very important strategic place. It was the furthest navigable place up the River Dee, but it was, although technically within the territory of the Cornovii tribe, it controlled the area which was between the Brigantes in northern Britain and the Decaangli, and more particularly the Ordovices in North Wales. Now, they had been a particularly rebellious tribe, so in a way putting the fort, legionary fort, where it was a way of stopping communication and perhaps collaboration between Brigantes and Ordovices, and it was a way of saying, we're going to occupy this place. It's a statement of power and control. Archaeology of Chester is quite difficult, and the reason it's difficult is because it's been much built over. It's an important medieval city, and although it's quite a small city nowadays, pretty much all of the Roman fortress, Roman camp, has been built over. So only when building work for a new building or new excavations take place is a significant amount of archaeology possible. There was some done in the 19th century, various bits during the 20th century, notably in the 1950s, and some little bits and pieces more recently than that. So what is the fort like? Well, we know that it was shaped on a standard playing card design, typical of Roman legionary fortresses everywhere. Everywhere there was a Roman legion, there was a legionary fortress, and it always had the same sort of buildings in it. And we know at Chester, there was a Principia building in the middle. It was very large. It had a basilica as part of that, a sort of meeting hall and justice hall, which was 73 metres long, with a vaulted roof. That's going to be very impressive, a big statement of power. It had a courtyard with a colonnade and some storerooms around that. Next to that was the Praetorium, the commander's house, and next to that would have been the Sacellum. Now, the Sacellum is going to be right in the middle of the fortress because that's where you keep your legionary eagle. If you want to know more about eagles, go back and look at the talk titled, funnily enough, Roman Eagles. So that's where that would have been, and next to there would have been the strong rooms, which would have kept the paperwork for the legion and the legionaries' pay. And there's an interesting tombstone of one of the people who would have distributed the pay to the men of Caecilius Avitus. A replica is shown here, and the replica has been coloured as probably it would have been done in ancient times. There was a valetudinarium, there was a hospital, there was a set of baths. Sometimes the baths were inside the fort, sometimes outside the fort. In this case they were inside, and they had the standard hypercaust, as you can see from this illustration from the archaeology of those. There was a civilian settlement that grew up outside the fortress because, of course, soldiers off duty would have had money to spend. So everywhere there was a legionary fortress, there was a civilian settlement nearby. And this, of course, became the basis of the later development of Roman towns and cities. In the case of Chester, not a great city, although an important one. It was a site of an early cathedral, as so many Roman towns were. But in the case of York, that became a very, very important city because it became effectively the headquarters the capital of the Romans in the north of Britain when the province was later split into two. So, what was the significant thing about Chester in the late 1st century AD? Well, under Gnaeus Julius Agricola, the campaigning governor, there was a major program of rebuilding at Chester. The previous turf and timber structure started to be constructed in stone, so it was clearly intended to be a permanent settlement. Some bits of that may have started under Agricola, and certainly some of that came later, maybe 15, 20 years later. We know from an inscription mentioning Trajan that was the case. But why was it so big? Well, there are two possible reasons for this that archaeologists have put forward. One is that Agricola says, reported in Tacitus's account of biography of his father-in-law, that Agricola had contemplated invading the island of Ireland, Hibernia, known to the Romans, and he said he thought he could do this with 1 legion. So it may be that expanding the fortress at this time and making it more sort of securely defensible was to do with that potential invasion of Ireland. Now, the Romans, as far as we know, never seriously went to Ireland. There may have been 1 or 2 trading links, maybe some thin evidence about a temporary camp just north of Dublin, but the Romans never really went to Ireland, although Agricola obviously contemplated doing so. Wonder if how the history of these islands might have been different had he done so. But there are some people who suggest that at this point, because Agricola was very much a campaigning governor, he was contemplating making Chester, making Deva, the capital of the province. Now, it's a strategically important place, it's a major development. I wonder how the subsequent history of Britain might have panned out had Chester become the capital rather than it staying in London with the financial capital. I wonder what north-south divide there would have been then, or would we now have been talking about a south-north divide and the capital being Chester, or even, amazing to say, maybe we would have all been looking to Scousers for a lead.